When I woke up in the morning, I was surprised to find that my muscles and bones were relaxed after a good night's sleep. I had almost expected them to be aching because I had pretty much slept on the hard ground. For a few minutes I just laid there and looked at the sky. Well, what was visible of it under all those big trees anyway. I noticed smoke coming from the chimney. The old Druid was probably cooking breakfast or something. I got up and looked into the pile of clothes he had laid down for me. He had been right about one thing. A lot of the clothes were too big for me. Then again, I had been known all my life for being a little smaller in size than other girls of my age. I chose to wear a short light blue dress, almost the same color as my skin. Not because I particularly liked it, but because it was one of the few pieces of clothing in there that actually fit me and didn't make me feel like I was walking around with a sail. The minute I entered through the door, the old Druid came from the kitchen with what looked like breakfast in his hands. "Ah, I see you're awake. Good. We can start pretty early today. But first, I'm sure you'd like some breakfast," he said, and put what he was carrying onto the table, then took a seat in the large chair in the corner of the room. I ate the breakfast, which wasn't particularly tasty, but I didn't complain. All the while, the old Druid sat on his chair reading a book that had some kind of a strange rune inscribed on its front cover. "What's that?" I asked. "Oh, this?" he asked and made a gesture at the book. "This is the story of an Orcish shaman, written by himself." "It's written in Orcish?" "Yes. I know what you're thinking, but personally I find languages a rather interesting study. If you look at my bookshelf here, you'll find that it contains books in almost every wide-spoken language of the world, except the Undead's gotta speak. From what I've heard, it's actually impossible to pronounce some of their words if you have a lower jaw," he said, and seemed rather amused at the end of the sentence. I took a glance at the backs of all the books on the shelf. I could make out that there were indeed books in many languages there, but not much else. "I can't read," I said truthfully. For a moment he seemed surprised, like he hadn't expected it, but the look on his face soon turned into the usual smile of his. "Well then, we'll just have to start fixing that, don't we? But first, if you've already eaten, let me take you somewhere." He opened the front door for me and we went outside. Then he started walking in a seemingly random direction and I followed. For about 15 minutes we walked through the woods and eventually stopped at a small opening. He told me to sit on a large flat rock in the middle of the grassy grove. "Now then, this is the first thing I'm going to teach you, and it's also the most important lesson you need to know." I looked at him, trying to seem like I was focusing on whatever he was going to say next. "I know from experience that this can be quite frustrating. At first it might sound pointless or stupid, but as a druid you really can't do much until you learn this." He turned around and moved like he was going to give me a big-time speech. "I'm talking about listening. Not listening to me, but to the nature around you." He turned to face me again, looking like he was just getting warmed up. "I do not speak of the birds chirping or the wind humming through the leaves of trees either. I mean a different kind of sound that they all make. Animals, plants, trees, even that rock you're sitting on. All druids and even some others have the skill and knowledge to listen to their surroundings in such a way." He took a short break and changed his tone back to a less formal one. I want you to sit there, relax your mind and body, close your eyes, and listen." I immediately did what he'd asked for, or at least tried. About 2 seconds after I'd closed my eyes, he interrupted me. "Oh, well, that's a start, but it really takes a lot more time to learn it. That's why I'm going to leave you here, so you can try it on your own for a few hours. I'm sure you'll find the way back." He walked a few steps away and turned around. "Besides, someone needs to prepare lunch for when you come back," he said, and winked at me. Then he walked off to the direction we came from. I closed my eyes again and relaxed my muscles, thinking that this would probably be pretty easy. For the first 15 minutes or so, all I could hear was what my ears told me. I tried harder, but nothing seemed to happen. I started to think that I was doing something wrong, so I sat up and walked around the rock twice. Then I sat down again, trying to make sure I was in a good position, and tried again. Nothing happened. After almost 2 hours of seemingly pointless trying and trying again, I had gotten nowhere. So I stood up and headed back to the cottage. When I entered through the door, I took my seat at the table and waited for the lunch, which the old druid was preparing in his kitchen. I just sat silently, not wanting to tell him about my failure. To my surprise, he didn't ask about it either. When he served the food and we began to eat, he simply took one look at my face and said, "I guess you didn't hear anything yet, did you?" "No, I didn't." "Don't worry, Kalia. I'd have been a lot more surprised had you been successful." I stopped eating and looked at him with doubt. I couldn't quite understand what he meant by that. Don't get me wrong, it took me about 3 weeks before I was successful. That's why it's a good idea to start early. Just keep in mind, as far as a druid's spells go, I can't teach you anything more until you learn what I've told you today.